Hello, and welcome to the Empowerography Podcast. This is a platform created for women's voices to be heard and a place to share their stories, journeys, and successes with the world for the purpose of helping other women who might be on similar journeys. We are empowering women one episode at a time. I'm your host, Brad Walsh, so kick back, grab one of your favorite beverages, and enjoy the stories. You've got a story to share, a message to inspire, and a passion ready to ignite. But where do you start? The world is waiting for your voice. With From Idea to Implementation, Start Your Own Podcast, you'll get the roadmap to turn your vision into reality. This isn't just a course, it's your launching pad. Step by step, we'll break down the process from defining your purpose to recording your first episode so you can finally share your voice with confidence. Stop overthinking it and start doing it. Your voice has the power to connect and lead. Are you ready to use it? Join the waitlist today. Your podcast journey starts now. The world is waiting. You can find the link to sign up for the waitlist in the show notes. We'll see you soon. Hello there, Brad Walsh here, your host of the Empowerography Podcast, a platform that was created to help elevate and amplify the voices of women through sharing their stories. Today, my guest is Sandy Rosenthal. She is the founder of the organization levies.org. She is an author, an advocate for the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and a podcast host. Welcome, Sandy. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here.
It has been a while. This has been a long time coming. I know we met quite a while ago. So we are finally here and able to do this. And I am so excited to have you here. So with that being said, let us jump right in. What was the catalyst moment that ignited your passion to advocate for the victims of Hurricane Katrina?
That ended up being what could have been a pretty vicious argument. But what actually happened is right after the flooding and terrible flooding that took the lives of almost 1,400 people, I got into a conversation with a gentleman not far from New Orleans, and I tried to explain to him how this flooding shouldn't have happened, the levees should have held. And he told me, and I quote, that there was nothing wrong with those levees. Katrina was a huge storm, and people like me shouldn't have been living in New Orleans, and we didn't deserve help.
What? People like you should not be living in New Orleans? What does people like you mean? I don't understand.
It means all people living there. And I could go on with what he meant by that, but the most important thing is he felt that victims, survivors, that's what we were surviving. Yeah. That we don't deserve help just because we lived in New Orleans.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't even believe that someone would actually think that, much less say it to another human being. How terrible. Wow.
So my reaction was I took my keys.
Yeah.
And he needed me because we were about to play something called doubles tennis.
Okay.
And I picked up my keys, kept my calm, and said, if you don't apologize, I'll leave now.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm sorry. However, because it put him in trouble. But you know what? It's okay, because that was the catalyst. And if I were to meet him today, I would kiss him on the lips because I needed that.
So how did your personal experience with the disaster shape your mission and fuel your determination to create change?
It's interesting. In the beginning, I got asked by reporters, ma'am, did you flood? Did you get any flooding? And I didn't like answering the question. In my mind, it was irrelevant. What difference does it make what happened to me? But the fact of the matter is, no, I didn't. And my son's school didn't flood. And my husband's business building didn't flood. And I felt lucky. I was lucky. That's it. And so I can't say that I felt guilty, but I felt lucky. And I felt that was just one more reason I needed to get the truth out after that little confrontation I just talked to you about.
Yeah. And so in the immediate aftermath of Katrina, what were the biggest injustices that you witnessed that made you realize something deeper was at play here?
You know, as I already mentioned, we were being blamed. The victims of this horrific flooding, this was no minor disaster. This was a bona fide catastrophe. Nearly 1,400 people died within a few hours. Many more died afterward, many to suicide. So that there's an injustice right there. But the other injustices were for the people of New Orleans. We all live by our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents, our children. And so if you flooded, everybody did. All your
Yeah.
family did. So that's one of the other things that pushed me to try to do whatever I could do to help the survivors of the flooding.
Yeah. I can remember I've had the honor of and pleasure of going to New Orleans a few times. And I remember I went pre-Katrina and it was amazing. I had so much fun. The people are amazing. And then I went post-Katrina. It was probably a year or two after Katrina, maybe 2 years. And there was still devastation everywhere. And I thought, what in the hell? Why is nobody cleaning this? This is horrible. People live here. People have been displaced. It's what the fuck are you people doing? Why is there no aid for these people?
It was, I'm not trying to defend the government, but it was the first disaster of its kind on U.S. soil where, 80% of a metropolis went underwater. So there was no handbook to refer to.
Right.
And huge mistakes were made, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does activism mean to you? And how has your fight for justice evolved over the years?
In my mind, activism is gathering a lot of people around you. It doesn't have to be thousands. It could be a handful. Gathering people around you and helping them see a problem and then getting those people to do something about it.
Yeah.
So another word for it, you could call it community mobilization. But in my mind, they're the same thing.
Yeah. And so how has your fight for justice evolved over the years?
How has
since you first started this journey? Yeah, since you first started on this journey.
Oh, that's a fun question. Thanks. So it started out as a very heavy business. And it was usually whenever I talked about what happened and tried to get the truth out, I would start crying. I know people who drowned. So, when it's that many people and we're not that big a city, it was a very heavy, sad job in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But as time went on, I learned how to mobilize. I learned the skills to do it. Whenever I saw an injustice going on, I could go, oh, I got this. And I would step in and offer my community mobilization skills that I'd learned and help this group or that group. In fact, I'm working on one right now. I'm actually working to save purple martins.
Okay. What's that all about? No.
Purple martins is a songbird that migrates all the way from Brazil to Canada.
Wow.
7,000 miles. And over the centuries, they've become dependent on humans. They rely on humans to create nest boxes for them.
Okay.
So right now, there's a couple in Harahan, Louisiana. One neighbor basically doesn't like it and is trying to get them to take down their nest boxes, which if they do, an entire colony of birds would have no place to build their nest. And that puts the babies at risk of hawks and vultures and all kinds of things. So I am now helping this retired couple keep their purple martin nest boxes. And it's fun.
Amazing. Now, can you tell us all about levies.org, the work you do in the organization, how you got it started, how has it grown over the years in terms of members, the mission, and how has it evolved?
Okay. You realize that the 20-year question, the flooding of New Orleans was 20 years ago this year.
That's crazy. When you think about it, that is nuts. 20 years have passed already since Hurricane Katrina.
And so your listeners need to know that we didn't have Twitter. YouTube was just getting started. So basically, social media was not an option in 2005. But we did have email. It wasn't that long ago. We did have email. And using the old-fashioned technique of emailing all your friends and family, we did have websites in 2005. My son was 15 years old. He said, Mom, you do a website. He said, excuse me, rewind. He said, Mom, if you do the mission and the message, I'll do the website. He was just turned 15 years old.
Wow.
And so Mom and son started levies.org. and using the old-fashioned technique of word of mouth, which they say is the best.
Yep.
We emailed friends and family, asked them to log on to their website, sign on, and overnight we had 200 members.
Wow, that's incredible growth.
Which is a lot 20 years ago when we didn't have the tools that we have today.
For sure. That is powerful. And so what is the mission and what's happening with levies.org today?
Sure. The mission from the beginning and still is today, education about why New Orleans flooded during Hurricane Katrina, because the survivors deserve it. The mission has not changed. And for anybody out there, trying to do good grassroots work, you can't change a mission. Stick with it. Stick with that thing that you're trying to do. You can take on different strategies and goals, which we've done over the years. For example, in the beginning, our goal was passage of an independent commission to figure out why the levees broke. Would you believe that the organization tasked with figuring out why the levees broke was the people who built them? The people who designed and built them.
Wow.
The Army Corps of Engineers. Why? I can tell you why people didn't scream. We were busy, the people affected, trying to figure out, where am I going to live? Where am I going to go to work? And if you had children, where are they going to go to school?
Yeah, for sure.
At the time, nobody asked this was the Department of Defense. No one asked the Donald Rumsfeld, what are you talking about? Why did you give this job to the people who designed and built the levees? You were asking them to figure out what went wrong. So what we did, so our mission in the beginning was demanding a truly independent investigation, and we called it the 829 Commission, which is the day, August 29th. So that was our initial goal, and we've moved on since then. Yeah.
So how many people are part of the organization
now? Today, let me tell you how much it started. That's a big, more of an eye-popping number. 25,000.
Wow.
Many of those were the diaspora, which is the people who were displaced.
Okay.
Remember I mentioned if you flooded, so did your mother and your father and your sisters and your brother. So a lot of people had to move away and just could never come back.
Yeah.
But those people remained New Orleanians and remained engaged. And a lot of these people signed on to levies.org to make phone calls or to send emails, to do what they could. Over the years, that number has shrunk. People have moved, all kinds of reasons. Some people have moved on. But still, we have 7,000 members to this day.
Amazing.
And all of 7,000 of those members, if I need them to make a phone call or send an email, or in this day and age, it's more like post something on social media.
Beautiful. See, it's the power of community and the power of voice and support. I think that's incredible. What were then some of the biggest challenges you faced when starting levies.org, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Wow. A really big challenge was something called the Katrina lawsuit. Okay. And the reason that was a challenge for me is a lot of people joined in something called the consolidated lawsuit. And their attorneys told them, don't talk to anyone. Don't talk to the media. Don't talk to anyone. I couldn't engage people who were told by their attorneys, don't talk to anybody. Don't sign up for levies.org. So that was a challenge in the beginning. Another challenge in the beginning was the Army Corps itself was fighting what we were doing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And it took me a while to figure that it was the Army Corps itself was fighting me. But that was a challenge. But you know what? There's always going to be a challenge, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing. A good friend of mine compared it to a cornfield. He said, you look out over the cornfield, and there's a lot of other people out there trying to do the same thing you are. But if you can just rise up just a little bit, just a little tiny bit, you'll get seen. And that's how you have to look at it.
I love that. That's amazing. So in your opinion, then, what were some of the biggest governmental failures in the handling of Hurricane Katrina before, during, and after the storm at all levels of government?
Okay, so before, that's absolutely the Army Corps of Engineers who wrongly designed and built the levees. Pure and simple. Nobody else. It was them. However, during the failure and the government organization that failed was FEMA. And it was very well described in this book by New York Times reporters. And the book is called Disaster, Katrina and the Failure of Homeland Security. And this book very clearly detailed how that, and I need to remind your listeners, communications were 100% down after the levees broke. Okay. Zero communication. No cell phones worked, nothing. All the cell towers were down, nothing worked. And FEMA has something called, I think it's like Red October or something October. It was a truck with a cell tower that they could drive in, crank that cell tower up, and they had communication for first responders. That truck sat in Baton Rouge for a week. Baton Rouge is about an hour outside of New Orleans because 2 different people ordered it and it got canceled altogether. Had Red October been driven into New Orleans, much of the death would never have happened. For example, the Danziger Bridge would never have happened. That's a case where because the police had no communication, they heard a rumor that there were armed people on the Danziger Bridge. Turned up it was a family just crossing the bridge. They had no guns, nothing, but because the police had wrong information, they opened fire on them and killed half of them.
Holy shit.
Had we had that communication, that wouldn't have happened. And that's just one example. That's just one concrete example. So in my mind, that was the biggest disaster. There were many failures, but in my mind, the biggest failure was FEMA, which is interesting that we're talking about FEMA now, because I'm sure your listeners know what a certain president is trying to do about FEMA right now. But that's another conversation for another day.
Yes, absolutely.
But we need our FEMA.
Yeah. Now, you wrote a book that talked about failures and all of the things surrounding Hurricane Katrina. What was the most shocking or heartbreaking discovery that you made?
Yes, I have an answer to that. I guess I'm going to say shocking. I was shocked when I discovered that the local newspaper, at that time it was called the Times-Picayune, the local newspaper actually sided with the Army Corps of Engineers in the plan to squelch the truth and keep it from the American people, which was that the Army Corps of Engineers was at fault. And at the time when I discovered this, and with rock hard evidence, when I discovered it, I got first of all, the Times-Picayune attacked me like something was wrong with me. And also, I was getting asked, why would the newspaper defend the Corps and hide the truth? But I don't know. I witnessed it, but I don't know why. And that's a ploy by the big guys or the bad guys, whatever you want to call them, to put the burden of proof on the person that witnessed the bad thing.
Yeah.
And if I could go back in time, I would have screamed longer and louder. But at that time, I was a novice. I'm not anymore.
During that, Sandy, though, how did you handle and deal with that and push through it to keep going? How your resilience to deal with the shitstorm that came at you by all these people who want to talk shit about what you're saying, not believe you, gang up on you. How did you handle that?
I applaud your word choice. And my answer is, over and over, I kept thinking to myself, I'm not an expert. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an elected official. I'm not even an appointed official. And if I'm getting all this pushback and I'm just a citizen with a big mouth, I must be right. Or at a minimum, on the right path.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me going. And the other thing was I surrounded myself with family and friends.
Because they wouldn't have been trying so hard if you weren't on the right path. They wouldn't have been screaming all the shit they were screaming and trying to stop you if you weren't on the right path.
Well said.
I appreciate your resilience. I think it's amazing, your resilience and courage to push through and continue on your mission. I think it's absolutely so admirable and amazing of you, Sandy.
Well, speaking of courage, this is a funny story. You've reminded me. Whenever I spoke to people from other countries, Africa, Pakistan, India, they would ask me, do you fear for your safety? And my response was a joke. I used to tell them that, yes, we have two different bumper stickers on our cars. My husband's car says his and my car says hers. And you know what? You have to laugh. There's some things you have to laugh or you'll just get bogged down in all the reasons to stop, and you can't do that.
Exactly. What was the process then for you of uncovering government negligence and mismanagement, and how difficult was it for you to get people to listen?
That is a great question. I don't think I've ever had it. I don't think I've ever had that question. And the answer is not glamorous. Dusty files, actual physical dusty files, and literally and figuratively. I literally went through dusty files, and some of my best gems, the best discoveries were in those files. But actually used without hyperbole is reading.
Yeah.
Reading. And I have to share a cute story. A member of the Army Corps of Engineers, when he heard me talking about a particular event that had happened when these levees were being built, this member of the Corps looked at me surprised and said, "How did you know about that?" And I said, "I can read."
It's pretty simple. I can read.
Simple. And on that note, before we move on, because I know you've got a whole show, is speaking of which, whenever you read a report that everyone's been waiting for months, don't read just the executive summary. Two reasons. One, information will be in that report that's not in the executive summary. And there's also something else. Stuff will be in the executive summary that's not in the report. In other words, it doesn't belong there, has no business there. So read the report. I know.
Read the whole thing.
Not glamorous, but if you want to become an expert and if you've got a job to do, read the report.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And so what kind of resistance then did you face when exposing the truth, and how did you handle those challenges?
I'd like to talk about the most alarming one, and that was, keep in mind, 20 years ago, there was this brand new thing. It's not allowed anymore. It's called anonymous commenting. There was a time 20 years ago when the whole idea of commenting on an article, the New York Times does it today, but not anonymously. You have to identify yourself. And you have to do more than identify yourself. I think you have to prove who you are. I think Times has gone that far with it. But 20 years ago, it was the Wild West. People could anonymous comment. You would not believe the vicious, ugly, mean, hateful things people said, not just about me, but my family, my kids, my family, my supporters. And that was hard. That was hard to deal with in the beginning. But, you know, I just had to remind myself that the fact that it's anonymous means that it probably would be too scared to do it if we knew who they were. Fortunately, and not in a very short time, that became no longer allowed because the news sources like the Times-Picayune and the New York Times realized it doesn't work. It was abused.
Yeah. So then I'm curious, with all the hatred and the horrible things that were being said about you and your family, was there ever a point where your family said, "Okay, Sandy, I mean, it's affecting us too. You got to stop. This is too much"?
It never got to that point. And again, only because I think it was apparent to me and my family members that, and one of my family members was my partner, that my son.
Yeah.
We kept reminding ourselves we must be right. And besides, what are they going to do to us? Fire us? I mean, that's what stops a lot of people in this whole world from speaking out. That's what stops the whistleblowers. They're afraid they're going to lose their job. They're afraid they may lose access to their money. So what were they going to do to me? So I and my family soldiered on.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard stories in recent times of whistleblowers ending up dead, right?
Yes.
So, and
yes,
I mean, there's that angle of it too, that is a possibility, because as people asked you, were you ever scared for your life? Did you ever fear for it?
I had to think about it. And something did happen that probably would have scared most people. I don't know why I didn't let it bother me. But I got home one day. It was the same day that my car was keyed. My car was full to the ceiling with yard signs that were announcing our very first rally that we would hold January of 2006. So my car got keyed. Annoying, but I survived. And I went to come in my back door, and there was a dead bird at my back door. The head had been chopped off.
Oh, wow.
Now, I was raised in the country, and I know I often had presents of songbirds from my cats. They would bring home birds with a head chewed off. This head wasn't chewed off.
Right.
It was chopped off.
Right.
I never said a word to my family. I picked it up. I put it in the garbage with a shovel, of course, and didn't tell my family. And it wasn't that I was afraid my family would tell me to stop. It was I had to put it out my mind. And I put it out my mind. When I put the lid on that garbage can, I shut that memory away. And you know what? I didn't think about it for years, many years.
Why do you believe the truth about the levee failures was initially suppressed, and who stood to benefit from that?
Oh, that's easy. Money. You need.
Of course, it always comes down to money.
Your listeners, I need to remind them that 80% of New Orleans flooded. We're talking about 1 million people here in Greater New Orleans. And had the Army Corps of Engineers been immediately found guilty of misdesigning the levees, that could have meant billions and billions of dollars of money that would have been pouring into New Orleans to rebuild. So the Army Corps of Engineers immediately got to work rewriting history and fooling the American public and Congress into believing that the flooding of New Orleans was somehow our fault. And they almost got away with it. Now, let's fast forward to that lawsuit I told you about. The Judge Duval, Stanwood Duval, did determine that the Army Corps of Engineers was absolutely responsible. However, that because of the Flood Control Act of 1928, the Army Corps could not be held responsible. They could be held responsible, but could not be held financially liable. And no one got a dime. No one got a dime.
Was it a matter then of the Army Corps of Engineers just cutting corners because they didn't want to spend the money to properly build the levees when they first were built?
Almost right. Almost right.
Okay.
In the 1980s, the Army Corps of Engineers was behind schedule. Costs were rising, of course. And the Congress told the Corps to go back, go home, and hurry up and build those levees. This was 1980s. This is about 12 years later, after Hurricane Betsy, when the levees almost hit. So the Army Corps came back and they decided to figure out a way to cut costs. Nothing's wrong with that. We all do it every day. That's why we go to Costco. They were looking for ways to save money on steel. Steel's expensive to buy, and it's very expensive to drive it deep into the ground to reinforce those levees, which are made of earth. They're made of dirt. Okay. So the Army Corps did a study. It's called the E99 study, if anyone wants to look it up, and wrongly concluded that they only needed to drive down those sheet pilings 16 feet instead of 46.
Holy shit. That's a huge 30 feet difference.
But they determined because of this study that any digging down deeper than that was just a waste of money. So they issued new guidances. All the levees all over New Orleans were redesigned. That includes the Lower Ninth Ward, which I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of, but it also included the Lily White Lakeview neighborhood and the next neighborhood in between, all of them. The day that Katrina's surge arrived, when water was still 3 or 4 feet from the tops of those walls, they fell over. That one of the canals fell over on both sides. Now, I'm not an engineer, but you would think that once the canal broke on one side, it would hold.
Yeah.
Fell on both sides, not too far from each other. So it was a design error, pure and simple. Now, with the Corps, was it malfeasance? Did they intentionally do that? No, but it was a mistake. And had that been a private company, they'd all be out of business.
For sure. Absolutely. 100%. Wow. Unbelievable. What is the most important piece of truth, in your opinion, that still needs to be widely known about Hurricane Katrina and that whole disaster?
Well, the most important thing is that the flooding of New Orleans was not due to Mother Nature, was not due to a big bad storm. It was engineering failure. Engineering. And there are not that many failures that belong to engineering. A lot of them is maintenance. The recent Miami condo collapse was poor maintenance. And I can point to others. The bridge, the Baltimore bridge
Yeah.
That one, it's a little too soon to know, but it might be engineering failure. It might be engineering, or it might be maintenance. But anyway, so that's the number one thing that I really think that not enough people know. Major media knows. Oh, major media.
But they would never tell that. They would never speak that, though.
They no longer put out wrong information. They have not put out wrong information since 20. But that doesn't, just because something's no longer said by major media, that doesn't necessarily make it go away in the minds of the American people. So
of course.
A lot of that wrong information is still there. And the other thing I really think people need to understand is right after a disaster, beware what you read, because it's probably either 80, it could be 50% wrong, maybe even 100% wrong. Mm-hmm. So beware what you read, beware what you believe immediately after a major catastrophe, like the LA fires, like the Hawaii fires, and like Hurricane Katrina.
Question. Always ask questions.
Oh, yes.
For sure. Absolutely. What lessons should governments and agencies have learned from Katrina? And do you think that they're actually implementing real change?
Yes. Yes. One of the reasons that a lot of people died is because our evacuation procedures had made no accommodation for pets. People were told they couldn't bring Fluffy. Naturally, people didn't get on a bus and leave Fluffy to his own. In fact, I have an actual example where the bus driver offered to shoot the dog humanely. No, I said no, thank you.
Wow.
And so after that, Congress passed, I think, pet evacuation and transportation, something or other. And what that did is, for all states in the country, in order to get FEMA assistance, you have to accommodate pets. Because what people would do is they stay home with Fluffy and die with Fluffy.
Yeah.
So that's one example that a big change was made. I can give you another example. The Army Corps of Engineers no longer uses the type of levees that broke during Katrina. Doesn't build those anymore. And I could give you more.
Yeah.
But yes, the answer is yes. The changes have been made.
So what policies or structural changes still need to happen to prevent another disaster like Katrina from occurring again?
I actually was pretty happy with a lot of the changes that were made. Keep in mind, the idea of an entire metropolis being totally cut off from the rest of the world is something that FEMA prepared for and got flummoxed with Red October. Okay, but FEMA will not make that mistake again, and things have changed. The Hurricane Harvey in Texas, it was devastating to a lot of people's livelihoods, their homes, but everyone had a cell phone the whole way through.
Yeah.
No one was ever without communication, ever. And Helene, another very devastating event, people never lost communication. It's that loss of communication that is critical. And hopefully, Brad, this is the last time that an entire metropolis will be cut off from the rest of the world. Hopefully that's the last time. Hopefully it never happens again.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So how did the disaster disproportionately affect marginalized communities, and what was the long-term impact on them?
Oh my goodness. Right after the flooding of New Orleans, I had a lot of reporters and journalists call me or email me and ask me, okay, talk to me about how the poorer communities, the marginalized communities, talk to me about how their levees weren't as good as the wealthy people. And I said, I hate to break it to you, but the Army Corps of Engineers was an equal opportunity destroyer. That all the levees were misdesigned everywhere.
Yeah.
And to say that the Army Corps of Engineers built inferior levees for the marginalized communities or the economically disadvantaged communities would be like giving the Corps credit for planning.
Yeah.
So they got mad at me when I said that. That's not the answer that they wanted.
Because if you gave them the answer they wanted, that's a hot story. People will eat that up, right?
Yeah.
They'll buy into it and they'll blow it up.
But what did happen, though, and it's going on not every day, thank heaven, but it's going on all over the world, that it's the economically disadvantaged communities, the communities that may not own their home, maybe renters those are the communities that are hit hardest because they don't have savings. They are in a disaster. They don't have a buffer to get them through. And what made it even worse in the city of New Orleans is the worst flooding probably was the lower Ninth Ward, not because the Army Corps of Engineers built them more inferiorly, if that's a word, but because what broke there was a navigation canal, not a drainage canal. And the damage was more catastrophic there. So you had catastrophic flooding, probably the deepest flooding. And then you had a community with no other community nearby that they could go live with or go stay with, even if they had friends. So in the case of New Orleans, we have a suburb next to us called Metairie. Metairie didn't flood. And so it was easy to go to Metairie to shop and use a post office and go to church. The people of the lower Ninth Ward didn't have that. So it was very difficult for the lower Ninth Ward. And if you go back to the lower Ninth Ward, even today, it still is not built back as much as it should be, as much as other
20 years later, it's still not.
That's correct.
That's horrifically sad. And is that now, I'm just asking your opinion, is that because it's the disproportionately marginalized communities that they've not built it back?
It's partly that, as I said before, a lot of them did own their home, okay, right. But their home was their assets. Now the home's gone, and there go their assets, and they need a place to live and they need a place to work. So they were affected more harshly, and it's not peculiar to the catastrophe of the flood event in New Orleans that's going on in Los Angeles right now. Marginalized communities are more harshly affected. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about, there's the media talking about the celebrities that have lost homes. Mm-hmm. They're going to make it.
Yeah, of course they will. Right. Yes. They have the money to buy homes again, to repurchase homes, or more opportunity than the marginalized communities do, for sure. They're better off.
Yeah, that's absolutely going on. And it's, like I said, it's not peculiar to only New Orleans.
Yeah. How do you see the emotional and psychological scars of Katrina still affecting New Orleans residents today?
Oh, New Orleanians, when we hear a whisper of a hurricane in the Gulf, in the Gulf, in the Atlantic Ocean, we are watching. We're glued to the news. We want to know, where is that storm going? So we're paying a lot more attention to the weather, even though we all know here that it wasn't the weather that caused the flooding. We all know that there was a trigger, that it was a trigger.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a really fun example. I'm not sure your listeners know that New Orleans had a 1 in 150 year snowstorm.
Right. No idea. Wow.
1 in 150 year snowstorm last week. That arrived Tuesday of last week, the day after MLK Day. But don't you know, us New Orleanians, we can handle anything. MLK Day, a lot of people were off work because it was a federal holiday.
Yeah.
What did we do? We all went shopping. We stocked up. We got food. We got anything we needed. And then a 1 in 150 year storm. We had 10 inches of snow.
Holy crow.
In the city of New Orleans. 10 inches. And nobody tried to go out and drive in it. We stayed home. No one lost electricity. So that was good from that standpoint. And then when the snow stopped, we all went out and played in it.
That's amazing. I love that.
And so we, on the one hand, we're more self-serving and we don't rely on the government, but we also know, hey, go ahead and have a good time while you can.
I love it. Now, how do you hold on to hope and perseverance when fighting against powerful institutions that would rather suppress the truth, like you've dealt with?
Wow. How do I persevere? I guess the answer is that so long as, again, I was one of the lucky ones. And I guess I just keep reminding myself that, hey, here's your answer. I'm not a born public speaker. No one is, but I wasn't a public speaker before I started the work of levies.org. And I'll never forget going for my first television interview. This is about a couple of months after the flooding. And of course, I was nervous. Of course, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
And I reminded myself, what I'm going to have to do in a few minutes when that camera light goes on and the camera's pointing at me is a walk in the park compared to what's happened to all these people who've lost everything.
That's a great way to look at it.
I was one of those. Wow,
that's powerful. Beautiful. What has been, would you say, the most rewarding part of advocating for those whose voices were silenced in the wake of the storm?
Oh, the friends I've met. I have met so many people doing the work of getting the truth out. Truth to power, they call it. But I have friends I never would have met all over New Orleans. I mean, you name a piece of New Orleans, I'll tell you I've got friends there. And these are friends, too. These aren't just acquaintances. I mean, these are hug and kiss type of friends.
Yeah.
Of course, we do that here.
Yes.
In New Orleans. So that's one of the great, what do you call it? The silver linings of doing this community mobilization work, meeting new people. I love it.
Beautiful. If you could deliver one message directly to those in power who failed New Orleans in 2005, what would it be?
Not an easy one. One message to those who were responsible. What's interesting is while they thought they were so clever, undermining me, turned up, I discovered them at their game. And so I guess what I would say to them is watch your back.
I love it. What advice would you give to other activists and advocates fighting for justice in their own communities?
Oh, this is my favorite question. I'm going to give you something that took me years to figure out because it's not obvious. So I'm so happy to share this. One of the things that stops the community mobilizer, the person that sees an injustice and wishes they could do something, what stops a lot of people is fear of maybe hurting someone's feelings or fear of making somebody mad. And what you need to remember, it's not about that person. And if I didn't have to speak out and have a healthy argument with Mary Smith, it would have been Marilyn Patterson. It'd be someone else. Yeah. So in other words, that always, if it wasn't that person, it'd be someone else. And the flip side of that is they're kind of saying not nice things to me and arguing with me. And I have to remind myself that it's not about me. It's about the issue. And it's about the issue, and just stick with the issue. Like I'm helping a retired couple with the Purple Martins. There's a couple of very loud-spoken, not very nice neighbors. And I have to remind myself, it's not about them. I don't even put their names in my head because it's not about them. It's about the birds. It's
great
about
advice.
Purple Martin songbirds.
Yeah, great advice. What is the most important piece of advice you have for someone who wants to uncover the truth and challenge systems of power?
I touched on this already, but in addition to really reading and really learning the material as best you can, don't worry about knowing everything right from the beginning. Nobody knows everything right from the beginning. Surround yourself with other people who do have skills. When someone offers you help, take it. Take it. I mean, nothing is more aggravating to an expert coming to you with advice, media, law, social media, than ignoring their advice. That's annoying to them. And if you take their advice, that's all they want. And they're not looking for thanks. They just want to know that you're taking their advice. So rely on the people who come to you and offer their advice. And remember, no one can do anything alone. No one.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces is that not one single person on this planet can do it themselves. We need support. We need community. We need guidance from others. For sure. Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. Now, let's talk a little bit about your book. The title of it was The Process of Writing the Book Like for You. And how long did it take you to write it? And how did it feel putting that out into the world for people to read? And how did it change you as a person?
That's a lot. So let's start with the title. Okay. Words Whispered in Water. What the heck does that mean? That was inspired by a sociologist that I got to know on social media. And she used to say, beware of talk that blames catastrophe on water and wind. Beware. Human beings are hiding behind those words. And that inspired the title, Words Whispered in Water. I'm not a journalist. writing is painfully hard for me. I do it because I have to.
Yeah.
The reason I wrote a book is a trusted colleague, his name is Ken McCarthy, called me on the phone in 2013 and told me, Sandy, you need to write a book. And here's my answer. I know. Didn't want to, but he made the compelling statement. He says, Sandy, you're the only person that can write that book. You're the only person that can tell that story. So I said, okay. And I started working on the book about a month later. It took me 5 years to complete, partly because I'm not a writer and partly because I was still doing the work of levies.org during that 5-year period. So, but I did complete the book and found a publisher. And I'm very happy to share with you that the publisher recently told me that they are going to do a second edition of the book that will be out this year on time for the anniversary.
Congratulations. Now, what does this second edition mean versus the original?
It's going to have a foreword written by the wonderful author who wrote about the Michigan Flint water crisis. And he wrote a foreword for it. And it'll have the same title, but it will have a new cover and it will have a new acknowledgement section, a very expanded acknowledgement section. That's my one regret. And it's the only thing I would say that if I could do it all over again, I would do. Mm-hmm. I should have included everybody, even if they wrote one email.
Yeah.
And made one.
Congratulations. Yeah. Congratulations on that, Sandy. You. Now, as mentioned, you're also a podcast host. Can you tell us a bit about the podcast, the title, content? Is it solo or interview style? And what inspired you to start a podcast?
Okay. The whole time I was doing the work of levies.org, I had this fantasy of doing a show and helping other people do what I did, because I thought, if I can do it, anyone can. I had no special training, no special skills, and I managed to stand up against the most powerful engineering company in the world. And I also realized that all the big guys all work out of the same playbook. That was my fantasy. And funny, that same colleague of mine who told me I needed to write a book, he's the one that said, Sandy, you need to do a podcast. He's a smart guy.
Thank you, Ken.
Smart guy. I said, okay. And I did. And it's called Beat the Big Guys. And it is not solo. I enjoy doing solo. But no, mine is interview style, just like this is. And every single week I have a guest. It could be a celebrity. It could be an expert. It could be just a very knowledgeable person. And to discuss a particular issue. One of my favorites, I've had 2 people harassed by their homeowners associations who stood up to them and beat them. 2.
Yeah. 2. Amazing.
And so that's really been a fun one. Big guys can take all forms.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. What do you think your unique skill set or superpower is that's helped you become successful?
Unique set of superpowers. I think it's a combination of, I never give up. I mean, to a point of being annoying. Okay. I don't give up. And for some reason, I don't mind asking questions, even when it irritates people.
Yeah.
Okay. So I really think it's a combination of those two. And as you mentioned, Brad, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, questions.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So speaking of success, how do you define success? What does that word mean to you?
In the case of levies.org, success is when major media all finally stopped describing the flooding event of New Orleans as caused by Hurricane Katrina. I mean, a typical thing when Hurricane Katrina ravaged New Orleans, that was a favorite among journalists. And it's lazy. It's lazy. In fact, we had a name for it. We called it Katrina Shorthand. It's lazy. So we believed, levies.org believed that we had met with success when the Associated Press issued a style guide alert. And for your listeners that don't know what that is, the Associated Press and the New York Times has something called a style guide. It's something that all of their reporters need to refer to when they're writing stories nationwide. And the Associated Press changed their style guide about New Orleans and issued a notice that reporters, when discussing the flooding, need to include that it was due to engineering failure by the Army Corps of Engineers.
How incredible is that? When you sit back and think about it, Sandy, these, what may seem like small changes to some people, because of the work you did with levies.org, have implemented massive things that have created massive change, really, when you look at it, like something like that, the Associated Press, making that change because of, in part or fully, because of the work you were. How does that feel for you? That's got to feel incredible.
It is incredible. It is a big deal. It's interesting that a lot of very smart people don't even know what it is, what a style guide is. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. If you're not in the literary world, you might not even be familiar with what it is. But it is incredibly powerful. And even more, Brad, this was a change. Yeah. I mean, changes almost never happen to style guides.
Yes, it's hard. Yeah. Change, period. Let's talk about not necessarily just style guides, but change, period, is hard. And so that is, I'm sure, just one example of a change that was created as a result of the work you did through levies.org. That's got to feel absolutely incredible for you. Truly.
It is a big deal.
It is, for sure. You should be very proud of what you have accomplished. I mean, along with your son and then all of the other members who came in and helped you. As we said, you can't do anything alone, but you had the spark. You and your son had the idea to start it. The fact that change was implemented because of something you started, that's fucking incredibly powerful.
A great word choice.
Wow. It's amazing to me. Sandy, what would you say is one of the most important things you've learned in your life? And what was your life like before you learned it? And what was your life like after learning it?
Believe it or not, the Dale Carnegie books are very good. There's two of them, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I read the two books in 1996, and they changed my life. And Dale Carnegie, those books were written in 1929, and they're still relevant today.
Yeah.
And what Dale Carnegie's book showed me is you have to look at everything from the other person's point of view. And before I read those books, I tended to feel that other people saw the world the way I did, looked at things and interpreted things the way I would. And Dale Carnegie taught me,
nothing can be further from the truth.
So that I would say Dale Carnegie, 1996 for me.
Okay. What does the word empowerment mean to you?
In my mind, it's giving you the tools to do something. And I don't mean a dustpan and brush. I mean something like the Dale Carnegie books I just spoke about. Those gave me tools. Some of them were silly tools, like how to remember names. He had a cute little trick on how to help you remember names. And he's right.
Okay.
It's a great tool to have, but it's much more than little tips and tricks like that. It was believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Trust yourself. Trust your ability to figure out something's wrong here. And I can do something about it.
Yeah.
I can't do something about it by myself, but I can get some friends and maybe 1,000 of my best friends, and I can do something about it.
See, I think that's a common thing that we as humans believe is that I'm just one person. What difference can I make? I can't do anything that's going to make a change. And that's partially true. You can't do it by yourself, but that one person like yourself coming up with the idea and starting something and then bringing other people into it. Yes. So you did truly make a difference yourself because you started it, but you cannot do it alone, as we've mentioned multiple times here. So yes, one person can make a difference because it starts with one person.
And you can start it.
That's exactly
true.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we're going to jump into a little rapid fire section here. So the next grouping of questions just be 1, 2, 3, 4-word answer type thing. Okay.
Okay.
How would you describe yourself in one word?
I'm sorry, Steve. I'm in a recording. He's not supposed to be home. Okay. So I'm sorry. Good timing.
No, that's okay. How would you describe yourself in one word?
Dogged.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
That's not going very fast, is it?
That's okay.
If I could be remembered for one thing, what would that be? That I believed in the truth.
If you could teach the world one thing, what would that be?
We all need to dance. So I would say if I could teach the world Zydeco dancing.
All right. What is one thing you love about yourself that is not related to your physical appearance?
Nothing. Oh, one thing I love about myself?
Yeah, that is not related to your physical appearance.
That I love about myself, not related to my parents. That I love to surround myself with friends And I love to give gifts.
What is one thing you want but cannot buy with money?
Now that's nothing. Just have to say nothing on that one.
Okay. That concludes our rapid fire section. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. I created a bonus question, which I did not send to you ahead of time. If you could take one feeling or belief and bottle it, Sandy, and give it to people, what would it be?
Hope.
What is one lesson that your career has taught you that you think everybody should learn at some point in their life?
If anybody complains about your tone of voice when you're talking about something, it's not your tone, it's what you're saying. They don't like it.
Brilliant. If you could step into my shoes, what question would you have asked yourself that I didn't ask you?
I don't think you asked me, why did I do it?
Okay. Why did you do it?
Why? I mean, how crazy is that? This is the Army Corps of Engineers. And no, why? Why did I do it?
Why did you do it?
And why did I do it?
Yeah.
Because I really didn't want to. I tried to find someone else who already was. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I spent a week, which is a long time back then, trying to find someone who's already doing the work that I felt needed to be done and join them. Let them lead it. Okay. So I couldn't find anyone. And so I said, I guess I'm going to have to do it.
Okay. If you could have, so I might as well. If you could have any three people in the world, alive or dead, sitting at your dinner table with you, who would those three people be?
Okay. Definitely Frances Crowe. She's no longer with us. She was 4'10", and she was a community mobilizer. And she'd been arrested many times. And before she passed away, I asked her how many, and she said, not enough. So that's one. And the other person I'd love to have at my dinner table, only because I've heard so much about him and I want to see it myself, is Bill Clinton. And I've heard so much about his charisma. And I want to, from what I understand, you have to actually meet him to understand what it means. So those two people.
Or one more, three.
So I don't have one.
Okay. All right. If you had the opportunity to sit down and have a 1-hour conversation with one woman, any woman in the world, who would it be and why?
Can I say Frances Crowe?
Sure.
Is that okay? She was tiny. When I say tiny, I mean 90 pounds.
Yeah. But
packed a punch and fearless and did so much in her lifetime. And of course, she lived well into her 90s. Mm-hmm. And when I met her, she was probably 90 years old. And so I would just like to ask her, how did you do it? What are your secrets, et cetera? Because if I feel unworthy, I've never been arrested.
There's a goal for your next bit of advocacy work.
I've come close, but it hasn't happened yet.
Sandy, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Speak up and speak loud. I was born profoundly deaf, and I had problems with the way I talked. I've actually taken speech therapy. I had troubles with my R's, my THs. I used to say, instead of chicken, it was chicken. And I took speech therapy. But anyway, if I could go back, I would tell myself when I was a little girl, I didn't take speech therapy, Brad, till I was 40.
Wow.
So I would go back and tell myself, don't worry about the way you sound. Don't worry about any of that. Just keep talking.
Lastly, Sandy, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, your corner of the world, your tribe, your people, what would that last 30 seconds sound like? What words of wisdom would you impart?
What would it sound like? Don't be afraid. Don't worry that someone might not like what you're saying, because that, if it's not one person, it'd just be somebody else. And there are two sides of that coin. Be tough in there. Anyone that's criticizing you, it's nothing to do with you. They don't like what you're saying. And so keep going, keep talking, believe in yourself. And don't forget to get exercise every day, even if it's just walking the dog.
Sandy, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing a little bit about your story, your journey, and the incredible light you put out into the world through the work you've been doing. It is absolutely inspiring and amazing. I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to sit down and speak with you and share all of the beautiful light you put out into the world, and to be able to call you a friend and have you as a member of the Empowerography community. Thank you so much for the work you do.
It was my pleasure to be here.
Once again, my name is Brad Welsh, host of your Empowerography podcast. Today, my guest has been Sandy Rosenthal. She is the founder of the organization levies.org. She's also an author and an advocate for the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and a podcast host. Thank you so much, Sandy. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share with all your friends. You can find me at viseuphoria.ca, follow me on Instagram at Empowerography Podcast, and on Facebook at Empowerography. Please join me next time for another inspirational story from yet another amazing woman.